Good afternoon and welcome to the Interim Finance Committee meeting, and I apologize for the delay of start. There were some flight difficulties with all the wind, but we are all here now. So, Committee Secretary, would you please call the roll?
Senator Cannizzaro.
Here.
Senator Goycochea.
Here.
Senator Harris.
Here.
Senator Neal.
Here.
Senator Nguyen.
Here.
Senator Severs-Gansert.
Here.
Senator Titus.
Here.
Vice Chair Dondero Loop.
Here.
Assemblywoman Anderson.
Present.
Assemblywoman Backus.
Present.
Assemblywoman Brown May.
Here.
Assemblywoman Dickman.
Here.
Assemblywoman Garlow.
Here.
Assemblyman Hafen.
Here.
Assemblywoman Howdigi.
Here.
Assemblywoman Kasama.
Here.
Assemblywoman Mosca.
Here.
Assemblyman O'Neill.
Here.
Assemblywoman Peters. Assemblyman Watts.
Here.
Assemblyman Yeager.
Here.
Chairman Ro Moreno.
And I am here. Will you please mark Assemblywoman Peters absent excused? We will have two opportunities for public comment. This will be the first. The second will be at the end of today's meeting. If you'd like to dial in with public comment, please dial 669-900-6833. And the meeting ID for today is 891-5307-2401. Then press pound. We'll start here in Las Vegas, and we'll go to Carson City, and then we'll go to our phone lines. Go ahead. Make sure that you state your name and spell it for the record.
Doug Unger, D-O-U-G-U-N-G-E-R, Nevada Faculty Alliance. Thank you, Chairs Monroe Moreno, Dondero Loop, and members of the Interim Committee for your consideration. After the mass shooting on the UNLV campus on December 6th, our faculty, staff, and students no longer feel safe. We are still grieving the murders of 3 beloved teachers, all minority professors resident with our diverse campus, also our visiting professor who was wounded. In the aftermath, we've been addressing support for a traumatized community's mental health and well-being first, followed by how to improve safety and security so that our students and faculty can again feel more secure. We're formulating plans, short-term, midterm, and long-term. Among the most immediate measures our NG leaders have implemented is increased security staffing, which is some small comfort to most of us, though by no means all of us. The approximately $2.6 million requested for NG from ARPA funds in Agenda Item D is a start to fund this additional staffing. Far more will be asked of our state in the very near future for infrastructure and other improvements with no little urgency. As long as our culture continues to sacrifice humane values to the cult of the gun, as long as we live in a society in which it is normative to address grievances with guns, as long as our body politic tolerates gun violence like a disease it is unwilling to cure, it is our responsibility to take every action we can to protect the lives of our students and those who teach them. I promise you that NG is hard at work on effective, practical proposals for safety and security improvements, which will make the most careful use of these urgently needed funds. Thank you for voting to approve and for your service to our state.
Thank you. Not seeing anyone else here in Las Vegas for public comment. Is there anyone in Carson City that would like to give public comment? Not seeing anyone at the table there. Do we have anyone joining us by phone that would like to give public comment?
Chair, the public line is open and working, but there are no callers at this time.
Thank you so much. And as I said, we'll have another opportunity for public comment at the end of today's meeting. So members, moving on to the next item on our agenda, I believe Mr. Leiser is here to give us a statement about the American Rescue Plan Act coronavirus recovery funds. Mr. Leiser, I will have you go first, and then I will have our GFO follow.
Thank you, Chairman Moreno and members of the Interim Finance Committee. For the record, Brody Leiser with the Fiscal Analysis Division, Legislative Counsel Bureau. I will walk through Agenda Item C1, the Statement of American Rescue Plan Act Coronavirus State Fiscal Recovery Fund Obligations and Remaining Unobligated Balance. The table has been provided as a separate handout outside of the meeting packets. Members should have a hard copy, and it is also available on the committee meeting webpage listed under Meeting Material, Agenda Item C1. At the top of page 1 is a high-level summary displaying expenditures for fiscal years 2022 and 2023. The amounts currently authorized, inclusive of the requests before the committee today, and the remaining unobligated balance. If all the requests submitted for consideration today are approved, there would be approximately $47.8 million remaining unobligated. As a reminder, these funds must be obligated by December 31st, 2024, and expended by December 31st, 2026. There were several revisions to existing rows on the table following the February IFC meeting, and those are identified in red text in the notes column on the far right of the table. These revisions were made to update identified savings amounts as confirmed with the Governor's Finance Office, as well as to make some minor adjustments to actual fiscal year 2023 expenditures for certain programs based on reconciliation information provided by the Department of Agriculture. As a reminder, the table generally lists program descriptions and amounts in chronological order based on the approval date. The items submitted for consideration by the committee today begin on page 24 of the table document. Under Agenda Item D, there are 19 requests to deobligate funding facilitated through 21 work programs. These items are listed on rows 251 through 269 on pages 24 and 25 of the table, and if approved, would deobligate $23.8 million of previously approved authority. There are 6 items that will have revisions requested to ensure that the project tracking is in alignment with the state budget authority. The revised amounts are reflected on the table and are noted in red text. I'll talk a little bit more about the deobligation requests shortly. In addition to those deobligation requests, there are 4 requests for new funding allocations facilitated through 6 work programs under Agenda Item D and the action item under Agenda Item E, as shown on rows 270 through 273 on page 25 of the table. If approved, those 4 requests would allocate a total of $4.1 million to support a CIP project at the Stewart campus, an affordable housing study, camera system upgrade for 2 Division of Child and Family Services facilities, and contracted security for the Nevada system of higher education. The committee will have an opportunity to hear each of these items and receive additional details about the requests. As I mentioned, I would like to circle back briefly on the deobligation requests. As I mentioned earlier, the table lists program descriptions in chronological order based on the approval date. We group all of the requested items for the committee's consideration at the end of the table. Therefore, the deobligation work programs that are listed on rows 251 through 269 are associated with an existing row higher up on the table. As indicated in the notes column, if these deobligation requests are approved, the reduction will be shown on the row containing the initial approval of the program on future statements presented to this body. Understanding that it would be helpful to see this information together now, we've added a section to our statement that starts on page 26 to include a table that summarizes all the deobligation work program requests so that the reduction can be seen alongside the original approved amount. So if you look at page 26 of the handout, this is a new section of the statement that we've added for this meeting. Again, it just is a summary of the request to deobligate authority of previously approved programs. And I'll just very briefly walk the committee through the format of the table in the event it's not self-explanatory. Moving from left to right in the columns, the far left column will note the agenda item associated with the requests before the committee today. The next column will identify when these programs were originally approved. As you can see, some of these go back as early as April of 2022 for their initial approval. And that column also references the row on our statement that, that these deobligations are associated with. The description column is the description that mirrors the original program description from the earlier section of the table. And then we show the originally approved allocation, what the FY23 actual expenditures were, if any, for these programs. If there has been any savings or deobligations that have already been approved, those are reflected in the column titled Approved Savings / Deobligation. There's a column to show the current remaining authority. And then the next column, the column that's titled Deobligation Request at the March 13th, 2024 IFC meeting is the amount that is associated with the work programs or revised work programs as revised that are being requested to have the authority removed from the budget. On the far right then is just a notes column that includes some additional information either about the request today and or if prior adjustments have been made, as well as the reason provided for the reduction. And that information comes from the work program material that was submitted by the agencies and by the governor's finance office and or based on information that was received from the state agencies. So again, we just wanted to provide this additional section in this separate table so that the members of the committee, as well as those following along, watching the meeting, can see the entire picture for these deobligation requests compared to the amounts as originally approved. And Madam Chair, with that, that concludes my remarks and be happy to address any questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Leiser. Members, do you have any questions about the document itself as presented? If there's any questions about the deobligation funds, that would be a question that would be saved for our GFO. Assemblywoman Kasama?
Thank you. Thank you for adding the deobligation work program summary. So I believe I understand. I just wanted to double check. So for the first column where we have on that program summary, funding for Department of Health and Human Services, we have current remaining authority of $1.5 million, deobligation 1.3. So essentially we're saying there's $200,000 left from the original authorization that can be used. Is that correct? I just want to make sure I'm understanding the spreadsheet correctly.
For the record, Brody Leiser, Madam Chair, through you to Assemblywoman Kasama. That is correct. You're reading that correctly. And I know for that particular program that $200,000, I believe, was expended on planning efforts that had gotten underway and were required to be paid. But you are reading the document correctly.
Thank you.
Members, any other questions? Not seeing any here in Las Vegas or anyone in Carson City with a question? Not seeing anyone raise their hands. And is there anyone in our virtual room with any questions? All right, not seeing any. Thank you, Mr. Leiser, for your report. And with that, I'll invite Ms. Stevenson, our GFO, up to do the second part of this. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Amy Stevenson, Director of the Governor's Finance Office. Thank you for having me today, Madam Chair. My spreadsheet is just, the master spreadsheet usually provided to this body is being updated for actual expenses and will be ready for the April IFC meeting. So this is just a summary of the 23 million in deobligations and the 4.1 million in new asks that Mr. Leiser had mentioned in his presentation. On our spreadsheet, on the GFO's document, the numbers on the left coincide with Mr. Leiser's spreadsheet. So line 49 on mine is the same as line 49 on his, so that you could cross-reference. And with that, I'm ready for any questions.
Members, any questions? Senator Neal?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So thank you for that explanation. Has the governor's office ensured that all budgeted allocations of the coronavirus funds will be met or will meet the federal obligation requirements of December 31st, 2024?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, to Senator Neal. Yes, we have made sure that they are either in contract or have subgranted to meet the federal obligation. Sorry.
Thanks, Madam Chair.
Members, any other questions about the document you have in front of you, the summary? No other questions about the summary itself? Not seeing any here in Las Vegas. Not seeing anyone with their hand raised in Carson City or in our virtual room. So thank you. I know that you will have many more questions as we move into D. So with that, we will wrap up item C on our agenda, and we'll move on to item D. And as we move into item D, members, we will hear items D1 through D21 all together. And item D22 will be heard with item E. Item D24 and D25 will be heard together, and item D26 and D27 will be heard together. Okay? So with that, we'll move to the first set of items, D1 through D21, and welcome back our GFO.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Amy Stevenson. I serve as the Director for the Governor's Finance Office. Item D1, I actually have to revise the numbers, so we have updated the numbers to read transfer of $9,378,231 from the American Rescue Act or ARPA projects category, $250,000 from the ARPA state agency allocations category, $4,799,969 from the ARPA crisis care category, $8,666,753 from the ARPA children's mental health category, $3,624,276 from the ARPA public health category, and $4,562,177 from the ARPA specific population category, which totals the $23,481,406 to the loss revenue reserve category to deobligate previously approved funding authority. I have revisions on some of the other D 8 through 13, 14.
Members, did everyone catch those new adjusted numbers? Would you like to hear them again? Could you state 31 again? What is the revision there? Category 31.
Which one? I don't have numbers on this one. I have the name of the category, sorry. The 866,753. Okay.
Is that the correct, that is the corrected adjusted amount? Okay. And I know we have a few questions. Senator Nguyen, did you have a question?
I'm sorry, could you just clarify what the difference is between what that was submitted in total, or is it just allocated differently?
There were, for the record, Amy Stevenson, Governor's Finance Office. It was a long flight. I was one of those ones that was delayed with fiscal staff as well. It's just it's to align the authority, so it's just a reallocation and make sure we got it out of the right categories. To put it back in loss reserve.
Senator Neal?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I guess my question is, how many of the projects and how much funding has been approved through the budget process that has not yet met the federal obligation requirement as a result of the pending contract approvals or other reasons?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, to Senator Neal.
You can go directly to the member.
Thank you, ma'am. We're trying to, so the ones that are not are the ones that you are seeing today, and then some that will be coming to April. And our last IFC at June will be our very last one for that. So right now, through our meetings, I have approximately, I don't have the total number of projects, but about another 9 million through our meetings that are coming to the April IFC. Did that help answer your question?
Thanks, Madam Chair. And I don't know if this is appropriate or not, but so, and I probably should have asked this when I asked the other question. In your actual list, there's a mobile crisis team in Washoe that their money is being reduced. Is there even a conversation about putting some of that money in the Clark County mobile crisis team where there's a larger population and we need more response on the street?
Thank you, Senator Neal. That would be a question for the program. I think, I don't know if they had a conversation, but I'd be happy to find out for you and get back with you.
Madam Chair, would you like me to respond?
Thank you. We were waiting to see if there was someone in the audience that could come up with the answer to that question, so thank you so much.
Good afternoon. Marla McDade Williams, serve as the administrator for the Division of Child and Family Services. We currently administer the mobile crisis response teams in both Clark and Washoe County. The deobligations are due to the salary component. So under the new guidelines that came forward, where we were unable to hire staff within the appropriate time frame, we ended up deobligating those funds. So it applies both to Clark and Washoe County, where we didn't have the opportunity to continue to use that funding because of that guidance.
Go ahead and answer.
So, thank you, Madam Chair. So it can only be used for salary, not for program?
For the record, Marla McDade Williams. So basically the program is all salaries. It's all people who go out and respond directly. They are individual salaried positions that do the response.
And Clark County is not in need, so Clark County couldn't fill any additional positions here? They couldn't find anyone?
For the record, Marla McDade Williams. So that's correct. We just have challenges hiring within the state system. And under the rules that came forward that didn't allow us to use positions that we had funded under state positions after, I believe it's December 2024, if we were not able to fill those positions by that time, there was no opportunity for us to redirect it to something else in that same program, whether it was Clark or Washoe County. So both of those locations were in the same position, at some point where just the hiring processes and lack of applicants, right, just prevented us from being able to fill those positions to be able to meet the timelines.
Okay, thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Speaker Yeager?
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. And, I just wanted to, I think maybe my question was answered, but I want to make sure. Senator Neal just asked about the crisis stabilization centers. Were the answers you just gave related to item D17, or were they related to something else?
For the record, Marla McDade Williams.
So the record's clear. Oh, please go ahead.
I don't know that they were related to a specific item. I just responded based on the question.
Okay, well, let me just ask this question for the record then. I mean, I obviously looked through here, and I'll just say, as an initial matter, it's somewhat disheartening to see that a lot of the deobligation is coming from DHHS, given the needs that we have in our community. And, I think this is one of the reasons that at the legislature we make a concerted effort to allocate money to nonprofits in the community to supplement the work that our state agencies simply can't do, either due to capacity or hiring or positions. So, be that as it may, I wanted to say that, but D17 sort of stood out to me because the initial allocation on that program was $20 million, and it looks like the deobligation amount is $5 million, which is about 25% of the program. And you'll excuse me, I kind of have notes all over the place, but I thought I saw something that said the deobligation was related to not being able to stand up crisis intervention in the rural communities. So I guess I just wanted to get a sense of, what is that $5 million that's being deobligated? Is that salary? Were there structural or procedural challenges from standing up programs? Because that one really did stand out to me as a really, really large numerical reduction.
Chair, if I may, Cody Finney for the record.
Good afternoon. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Cody Finney, Administrator of the Division of Public and Behavioral Health. D17 is an item that is in my division, and the reason for the deobligation in this item is that staff have been working with several agencies to stand up crisis stabilization centers. We had in the original proposal of the $20 million set aside $5 million specific to rural services. The organization with whom we were working on rural crisis stabilization, which actually, there is one rural crisis stabilization center currently in operation, but the organization with whom we were working identified that they had some other needs that needed to be put in place before they could stand up more crisis stabilization service. And so because of the way this was designed in the funding, we want to deobligate this money for the specific purpose of a crisis stabilization center so that it can be used in the necessary time frame for a service, hopefully a mental health service, but we will be able to, we are continuing to work to support crisis stabilization stand up in the 2 urban areas. Happy to answer any additional specific questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the follow-up, and thank you for that information. I guess my follow-up on that, we've talked really for, I think, a decade or more about crisis stabilization, and particularly in the rural communities, in terms of the resources that it takes to transport folks from rural communities to forensic hospitals, because we don't have many of them in the state, and they generally are in the urban areas. So, I think that was obviously one of the motivations for doing something on crisis stabilization in the rural was to prevent taking law enforcement resources and the transport and all of that. So I think what I heard you say is we're still, sort of doing what we were going to do in Clark and Washoe, but And I understand the deobligation because we want to make sure the funds don't revert back to the federal government, but is there a plan still in place to be able to address crisis stabilization in the rural communities? It sounded like we had a vendor and they wanted to see some groundwork laid first, but is that still in process, or are we back to sort of ground zero and trying to figure out how to solve that problem in the rural community?
Cody Finney for the record. Thank you for the question. So this funding was specific to the Crisis Stabilization Center, which the way it is currently laid out needs to be associated with a hospital. So we're going to continue to work for ways to set up crisis stabilization centers anywhere we have a need for them. The specific issue about having people transported to psychiatric facilities, which sometimes has been done with law enforcement. So the specific issue of that was not addressed by this crisis stabilization center piece. And we do continue to work with on projects for transportation of those individuals who are in need of psychiatric settings. I believe that, Speaker, you referred specifically to forensic hospitals. Those folks are in the custody of law enforcement, and it's somewhat different than our civil setting. This crisis stabilization is in the civil area, and so that transportation is likely to remain with law enforcement for the forensic settings. Happy to go into more detail at any time that's helpful.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just ask one more, and I think I probably wasn't precise in the way I described that, because obviously I understand there's a difference on the criminal forensic side versus the, sort of the legal 2000 side, and I think that's what we talked about for a long time was the legal 2000. And so I guess just to make sure I heard you correctly, the $5 million that's being deobligated really wasn't going to address the transportation piece. It was simply that there aren't adequate facilities in the rural communities to co-locate, I guess would be the word, a crisis stabilization center per se at a hospital or healthcare facility. And that really was the issue with this particular program as envisioned.
Thank you, Cody Finney, for the record, and please forgive me, Speaker, if I misunderstood the original comment or question. Yes, this was not specifically directed at the transportation. The hope was that we could establish some kind of centers which would hopefully limit the need for transportation, but this was for that capital improvement type of activity, and that has not come to fruition in a time frame that this funding allows.
Senator Nguyen, did you have a question?
I'm sorry to belabor this, but I just want to, make sure. I know that there are quite a few, I guess, deobligation and requests that are a part of this, and I just want to make sure. I know that there's some ongoing substantial projects that have long-term strategic plans that have been taking place between the county and the city of Las Vegas, Clark County and the city of Las Vegas around these crisis stabilization centers. And I just want to make sure that none of these funds that are being deobligated have anything to do with those existing programs and those plans.
Cody Finney, for the record, this deobligation is specific to that piece that was set aside specific to the rural areas.
Thank you.
So I do have a question. With the deobligated funds, if there are crisis stabilization centers underway being built in Washoe County, in Clark County, maybe adjacent or not adjacent to county hospitals like UMC, could that $4 million be redirected to those crisis stabilization centers?
Cody Finney, for the record, the way that the language that we had solicited information, set that aside specifically for the rural areas. At this time, I'm not aware that there's a proposal for additional funding. The rest of that $20 million pot is allocated or is being allocated to those other areas, and I'm not aware that there's additional need currently. I'm not aware of a rule that prohibits that $5 million from being allocated in the manner you described, Chair.
Thank you so much for that. I guess if it's not, we would have to talk to the GFO about an additional work program at a future date. Correct? Okay. Assemblywoman Bacchus.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I'm kind of changing direction and more towards the Governor's Finance Office. Beyond the requests that are submitted for consideration today, how much additional savings has the Governor's Finance Office identified from previously approved coronavirus state fiscal recovery funds as a result of meeting with state agencies? And when would you anticipate work programs to be submitted to reflect those savings?
Thank you. For the record, Amy Stevenson, Director for the Governor's Finance Office. Right now, after having those meetings with the state, it's approximately $9.5 million that we have identified. I do have another meeting on Friday. Those are actually being transmitted because today's our deadline for April IFC as we speak. So of that 9.5. The meeting on Friday, don't know when that'll come over. It'll probably be June if I can't get it on April's.
Thank you so much for that. And then also, I know you have the 9.5 million in your mindset, so this kind of could be a little more deeper dive into that. Can you discuss what projects are being considered by the governor for consideration to be funded with remaining unobligated coronavirus state fiscal recovery funds? So maybe that 9.5 and then the 23 we're looking at today and some more. Do you know what the plan is?
Yes, so the governor has 6 priority projects that are actually coming over, were submitted this morning, and then the 2 are following this afternoon for the April IFC. One is with the Office of the Military for $850,000, Washoe County for a West Hills facility rehabilitation for $14.5, Boys and Girls Club for Early Learning Centers, $16,765,000. Department of Corrections High Desert Prison Culinary Equipment is about $1.8 million. Vitality Unlimited, it's to help or to finish create integrated mental health and addiction treatment campus for $3 million, and Opportunity Village for Betty's Village North for $5 million. So it's approximately $41 million.
And then just out of curiosity, is it the Boys and Girls program for early learning, is that throughout the state or is that just one location?
I believe it's throughout the state, but let me double check. I don't have it in front of me, but I will get back with you, I promise.
And Madam Chair, I apologize. I have one more question. Is that okay? Thank you so much. One other thing is I know you went over the revisions for agenda item D1. I understand there's also some slight revised amounts for D8, D9, D10, D12, D13, and D14. And if there's any other ones, do you mind just putting on the record what those revised amounts are?
Of course, I just was waiting for when I can do that. And these are to align with D1. D1 is, I guess, a pitcher and a catcher. So these will align with the categories that I just mentioned in D1. So item number D8, it needs to be revised to say a deletion of $160,586 in Federal American Rescue Plan Act Coronavirus State Fiscal Recovery Funds with an equal reduction to the personnel category. Item D9 needs to be revised to a deletion of $733,715 with an equal reduction to the personnel category. And then item D10 needs to be revised to deletion of 245,864 with an equal reduction to the personnel category. Item D12 needs to be revised to deletion of $104,443 with an equal reduction to the personnel category. Item D13 revised to deletion of $236,717 with an equal reduction to the personnel category. And item D14 should be revised to the deletion of $355,860 with an equal reduction to the personnel category. And I'm happy to repeat any of those if you need me to.
Senator Neal?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm kind of walking backwards a little bit. So the $3 million that you listed for Assemblywoman Bacchus, where was that going? The mental, it sounded like a mental health.
Oh, thank you. For the record, Amy Stevenson, Director for Governor's Finance Office. Vitality Unlimited, it was to create an integrated mental health and addiction treatment campus for $3 million.
Where?
I can find out for you. It just.
So is it in Washoe or is it in Clark?
It's in Carson. Is Vitality in? Yeah.
It's in
so
Carson.
It's Carson City. Thank you.
And just really quick, so this facility will help Carson with how many folks?
I don't, for the record, Amy Stevenson for the Governor's Finance Office, I don't have those details on those programs with me, but I'm more than happy to have a conversation because we've submitted those work programs, so I can give you that detail.
Okay. Madam Chair, can I just ask one more question and then?
Go ahead, and there may be someone from DHHS in the audience that can answer the question.
I guess what I'm trying to, like, when I look through all of this, and I'm just thinking globally, what is the plan by the governor around the mental health rollout of these dollars if they're redistributed? And the plan, because, you know, when we talk about mental health, immediately we go to homelessness. Well, that's a natural trajectory. But what is the actual global plan on impacting the mental health space, addiction, crisis, mobile team needs, and homelessness that is kind of already, that is the broader umbrella in which those services are usually under? Is there a plan? So when you come back in April, we're going to see, well, because he's taking on X, Y, Z, and G, this is how we're going to impact change. Because I guess I'm not seeing it. I'm not processing how these help with the global need that's going on.
Thank you. For the record, Amy Stevenson, Director of Governor's Finance Office. I can have that plan for you and to say where the impact is, or I can have the governor's office provide that overall. Right now, we are aligning all of our projects to the governor's 3-year policy matrix, and I know that mental health is in there under the health and wellness. So we are trying to align it to this, and I can get you a copy of this if you would like.
Thank you.
Senator Dondero Loop.
Thank you very much. And one of my maybe more of a statement than a question, but I wonder how the overestimation of what was needed, which is a huge amount, happened. Because I think about things that we allocated funding to that we couldn't allocate. So maybe somebody needed, I don't know, an airport could have needed money. We couldn't give them money, right? I mean, I'm thinking about all the things that we allocated money to at the legislature during session. And I feel like there could have been people that could have used the money. So how did the overestimation happen, bless you? and I don't know if you know the answer to that, but also with saying that, is the money that was the overestimation or the deobligated funds, if they were for something in the south, is the money going to be reallocated to something in the south? And if the money was maybe in the north, are they, I mean, what I'm hoping is that the deobligated funds don't get stockpiled into one area, and that we use the money that was allocated throughout the state as a whole. I'm from the South, but I also know this state, and it's very apparent that there's a lot more people down here, and so the services may be in need at a different level. So if you can, I don't know if there's really a question in there, but if you can sort of give me some information, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Senator Dondero Loop. For the record, Amy Stevenson, Director for the Governor's Finance Office. Right now, all the projects that are coming in for this possible deobligation or proposals are being vetted to make sure that they can meet the federal requirements for obligation, make sure they follow the ARPA rules, and then they align with the governor's strategic plans. And then the governor's office is prioritizing those. So that is the current process that we're using right now.
Assemblyman Watts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation of all this information. I guess just to put a finer point on a couple of the things that were brought up by my other colleagues, first of all, I understand the difficulties that we have in sometimes finding vendors, getting staff hired up, and while it's unfortunate to see a lot of these reductions, I understand it. I also understand that sometimes we had an idea and some things came up, and we're obviously operating under a very tight timeline for the obligation and expenditure of these funds. But it definitely does concern me that many of these were statewide in scope. We have some projects that are being reduced, but we do have again, the mobile respite program is also being completely deobligated. We've got the Nevada Resilience Project is being completely deobligated, over $20 million in healthcare, including significant investments towards mental health, behavioral health, being deobligated. And, and it sounds like it's going to be reobligated, but not all of that is necessarily going to go into healthcare or mental health and have a statewide scope. So, I guess that's just a concern that I want to put out there. I understand why probably all of these programs may make sense for deobligation, but I would hope that we would be reconsolidating some of that funding, investing in the things that we can get going and that are going to be working, or at least keep some of this in some of these needs that are so critical, instead of potentially moving them to other areas. I'm just concerned about what the impacts are going to be to healthcare when we look at moving things away from these programs into other areas.
Was there a question, just a statement?
I guess, so my question, just to follow back up particularly, so Ms. Stevenson, I know you just listed, so I don't want to necessarily make you relist the items that you had. But I guess what is the plan? So you noted that mental health is one of the focus areas for the governor. I guess my question is, what's the plan for additional investments or reinvestments of some of this funding into healthcare and behavioral health programs? Or is it just the facility in Washoe County and the facility in Clark County? Is that all that we have planned right now?
Thank you, Assemblyman Watts. For the record, Amy Stevenson, Governor's Finance Office Director. That I'm going to have to pitch down to the Health and Human Services team for that plan.
Hi, for the record, Richard Whitley, Director for Health and Human Services. As you may recall, one of the ARPA projects, a large one that DHHS did, was a master plan for the Southern Nevada Adult Mental Health Campus off Charleston. Those of you that know the state probably know in Northern Nevada, we had a lot of buildings that were empty. We partnered with Washoe County many years ago to actually try to address homelessness issues by focusing on priority populations such as adolescents, pregnant women, families. And we're able to be, I think, quite successful in partnership with Washoe County to actually provide housing and services and a pathway to more permanent and independent living by addressing underlying mental health and substance abuse issues for those populations. The plan in coordination and the ARPA project that was approved and fully executed on a master plan for the campus in Southern Nevada, where we don't have buildings, but we have land. And so that's what the master plan was. I don't have it with me, but happy to make that accessible. That's the product of what was funded. We are continuing to work with the stakeholders in Clark County to actualize that plan. I could create a report and give you an update on it, but here today, I don't have the overall plan and where we're at with rolling it out. We're in different places in different parts of the state. As you heard from Ms. Finney, we are working hard with our critical access hospitals in the rurals to build off the infrastructure that already exists. Carson City Hospital serves a role to many of the rural hospitals. They have an acute psychiatric hospital or an acute psychiatric unit under their hospital, and are working very well with many of our rural hospitals. And so we are working on some different strategies, but they are really geographically based, and I'm happy to follow up with what that plan is so that these individual projects that by themselves don't really tell the whole picture could maybe be connected to that overall plan and where we're at with it. I think it might be helpful then when we talk about these individual projects where they fit. The whole goal is to serve people with serious emotional illness or substance abuse issues in the community at the lowest level possible. The unhoused population probably is the most challenging, and so priority in Southern Nevada is to look for transitional living and temporary residential as a vehicle to get stable and then move on into more long-term housing and employment, and tackling populations such as the elderly, pregnant women, adolescents are populations that we have quantified and, in many ways, as we've experienced in Northern Nevada, are winnable battles, really, when broken down and looking at the challenges. And so happy to provide that to you. I know that's it's a complicated question, and it requires really the complicated response and then made geographic where the needs are different and communities are at different places with their capacity. I don't know if that adequately answers your question, but I'm happy to offer more formal response as a follow-up.
Oh, I don't think a follow-up will be necessary. Thank you, Director Whitley, but I appreciate the detail and the complexity of this. Would love to see that plan. And I think, again, my bottom line is that we continue to dedicate state resources towards advancing and actualizing that plan. That's what I want to make sure that we continue to see throughout this interim as we are working to manage and ensure that all of these funds are obligated and spent.
Senator Neal?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Director Whitley, is the Southern campus you're talking about a part of I believe it was SB 525, the $100 million that we dedicated, and with the matching $100 million, is that Is that what that is being used for? Or is that not a part of that?
For the record, Richard Whitley. It certainly could be a part of it. We're having discussions with all of those stakeholders and looking to maximize that opportunity. I would feel more comfortable if I could provide a follow-up with the plan, but that is included. I think, one of the things that we're really trying to do is to not miss all the opportunities, and really it's all hinged to that master plan paid for with ARPA funds for the campus to serve populations, and it's that master plan is still relevant today. So I would say yes to your question that we're engaging, but I can't give you, it hasn't landed like in terms of contracts or where it's at. We're still in a planning stage, and I think that I've said this before, that when it comes to these healthcare services, we're trying to be deliberate so that there isn't a service sort of cliff at the end where everything drops off. And so we're working with Medicaid to ensure and to try to timeline out so that if some of these services in the community need a waiver or some action on Medicaid's part for reimbursement, that we're syncing it up so that as we stand them up, they could be sustained for this population. And so I'm sorry that it's not put together, but it is anchored to that plan that was invested in, and it's best looked at geographically with the overall goal that no pregnant woman, no adolescent, no elderly person should be unhoused with health conditions, and we're starting with those populations because the service needs are apparent, and again, they're populations that we could intervene with. And so I think that if I could pull together the master plan and then where we're at, that would be informative, certainly in Southern Nevada. I think in the rurals, just we're having to be strategic and working with the partners. Some of the rural access hospitals are really, they identify a mental health need, but they really don't have it. No one has responded to our RFP with interest in standing up a crisis stabilization center attached to their hospital, other than Carson Tahoe Hospital.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, and not seeing any other questions. What I will say is I know collectively we can say that we know there's a healthcare crisis in our state, has been for a while, especially a mental health crisis. And these dollars, going way back to April 22, were allocated to address that. But we also know that staffing for state employees have been a crisis in this state, the situation we've been in. That's why this body made it a point to make sure we had compensation for our state employees that was put them in a better place than they were before the last legislative session started, to make hiring easy. But we also know that's not going to happen overnight. So as we do move forward and put together a master plan, I'm anxious to see what that plan will be so that these dollars will go to programs where they were intended to go, and in areas of our state that have some of greater needs than others. There's a need everywhere in the state, but some areas have a greater need. So I'm looking forward to see what those work programs will be going forward, or where we move these dollars that are being deobligated today, because the need is still there, whether the dollars are sitting in a bucket, deobligated, but that need is still there, and these dollars still need to go to what those areas were. So I'm looking forward to seeing what that master plan will be. But we can't beat a dead horse today. We need to move on. So I thank you, Mr. Whitley, for coming up with the answers to the questions from my colleagues. And I'm not seeing any other questions. So I think we'll move to a vote, and I will accept a motion to approve the deobligation of items D1 through D21.
Madam Chair, I would move as revised the listed items that you stated.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion from Assemblywoman Bacchus, a second from Senator Don Darrell Loop. Any discussion on the motion? Not seeing any. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Then the motion moves with no opposition. Thank you so much. Then we will move on to the next item on our agenda, which will be D22, and we'll hear that with item E.
Thank you, Madam
Good
Chair.
afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Will Lewis, for the record. I am Administrator of State Public Works Division. Item E is a request to receive and expend an additional $521,653 of ARPA funds for CIP Project 19C16, which is the renovation of the collection storage building here at the Stewart facility here in Carson. We're ready for any questions you may have.
I believe we do have a few questions. Assemblywoman Bacchus.
Thank you so much, Mr. Willis, for your presentation. Just for follow-up and clarification, with the anticipated change and the request for the $521,653 additional funds for this, do you anticipate that will be sufficient and there won't be any other additional funding that would be required to complete this project?
Excellent question. Thank you. For the record, again, Will Lewis, Administrator of Public Works. Yes, we conducted a cost estimate, and we feel that the money being requested will more than cover what that additional modification of the scope we're requesting.
Thank you so much for the question. Members, any other questions? I believe Assemblyman O'Neill had a question. Do you still have a question, or was your question answered?
It was answered. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions on item D22 and item E, I'll accept a motion.
Madam Chair, I'd so move.
And I'll second.
Thank you so much. We have the motion from Assemblywoman Bacchus, a second from Senator Don Darrell Loop. Any discussion on the motion? Not seeing any. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We will move on to our next items. It will be item D24 and item D25. Item D23, excuse me. We'll go to D23.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Michael Stewart. I am the Research Director with the Gwynn Center for Policy Priorities. It's good to see many of you again today. As you know, I spent better part of a quarter of a decade with the Legislative Council Bureau. So we are here today with regard to a housing study in the amount of $150,000. And joining me down in Las Vegas is our Director of Economic Policy, Meredith Levine, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Good afternoon. It's good to see you too. I know we do have a few questions. We'll start with Senator Dondero Loop.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And we've done so many studies over the years, and so I think it's really important for us to know, would the findings of this Gwynn Center's study on affordable housing be completed and available prior to the beginning of the 83rd or the 2025 legislative session? And the reason I ask that is because we keep doing studies, but it doesn't feel like we do anything about it. And so I'm very hesitant to do one more study and not do anything about it. So would the recommendations be provided in the study be incorporated in that executive budget for the next biennium? So thank you very much.
Meredith Levine, for the record, thank you for the question. Absolutely, and that is the intent, and that is the way we have scoped this particular project, with a completion date of October 31st, 2024. The idea is timeliness and relevance. We are aware that there are many, many studies, but our goal is to provide a menu of policy solutions that are formulated and evidence-based that will be useful to you and to others as we move into the next session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I hope so, because honestly, if I see one more study on housing and we don't do anything, I just can't even describe. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Neal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So in your study, are you at all taking into account the Southern Nevada regional transportation study, I think it's not that study, and then Southern Nevada Strong? What is it? What is the group that's been meeting for like 20 years? I'm serious. I'm sorry. But because there's direct correlation between housing patterns and transportation. And are you looking at multimodal, meaning instead of, we have density in the center and then not so much on the outer edges. And then also, are you looking at, instead of somebody getting like a single family home, but being able to purchase a townhome and that being available, and versus, you know what I'm saying? Because there's limited space, there's limited water. I'm just wondering, what are the other things you're intersecting with this?
Meredith Levine, for the record, thank you for the question. Absolutely, there's just an intersection of, everything in this study. So it's housing, it's health, it's education. Now, of course, because of the timeline and because of the scope, we cannot address every single issue, but because of the particular intersections, it's important to us to take those factors into account. And so there are various housing options. If I started to outline them now, we wouldn't need a study. But part of the justification is to look at these most innovative solutions that tackle the thornier challenges.
So just, Madam Chair, just really quick follow-up. So I'm gonna, you can say yes or no. You are looking at how planning, I don't know what they're called, planning commissions move and zoning regs, because they have a huge say in how we build and how we move forward and whether or not we're going to change that trajectory. And they're typically the planning, and whether it's at the city, county, they're in the front line and deciding how we build, and also the stakeholders that are on the outside. So you are going to look at that. You are looking at that as well.
Meredith Levine, for the record, I can confirm that, yes.
Okay. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Canizaro.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you talk to us a little bit more about what exactly, I'm sorry, I have a question before I get to that one. In the work program, it mentions that part of the process is going to be reaching out to stakeholders and having meetings. So like, who are we talking about? Who's going to be involved? Who are you going to be consulting? Like, who is going to be part of what this study is doing?
Meredith Levine for the record. Thank you for the question. So everybody who, well, not everybody, not the universe, but everybody who would have a stake in housing, so that could mean the community. We don't want to be too narrow and say right now exactly who they are, but we're definitely talking to housing authorities, local governments, state governments, the Housing Coalition, the Department of Housing. We will be soliciting input to inform that stakeholder list because community input is important. Indigenous, tribal communities are important, disadvantaged communities, et cetera. And so we want to cast that net and hear from all the voices that are affected by housing. And that at this point is a lot of people in Nevada. And that's why we think this study is important.
And I guess just kind of on that note, part of this where I think we're struggling with is that there are a lot of studies out there on housing. There is a lot of information out there. There are reports that are put out on a yearly, annual basis by Washoe County, Clark County. There are studies that the legislature has done. Obviously, the one that I think probably correlates the most to this is from the 2017 legislative session with the 2018 report. The recommendations that were included in that report were obviously adopted by the legislature, and those bills were passed and signed into law. But there are not only prior legislative studies, there are also ongoing Gwynn Center studies. There are also these local governments that are bringing forward studies. There are different subcommittees from the homelessness to housing to reports that are being put out by the Nevada Housing Division. So to me, I guess, where I struggle with what is it that we are putting in this report that isn't already being done by the universities, local governments, the housing authority, the federal government, the Gwynn Center previously, the legislature previously. It feels like we're looking for solutions to a problem that we know exists, and don't like some of the solutions that are readily apparent before us. And so we're going to try to find a different solution because we just don't like the ones that are being presented in all of these different formats.
Meredith Levine for the record, thank you for that question as well. So that is absolutely fair. I don't disagree with that point in any respect. There are many studies, many solutions, many formulations, many policy options. We are not taking an approach in this study as we propose it to actually do something that you may not have seen before. Again, we're not trying to be duplicative, but at the same time, there may be some tried and true solutions in there. What we're trying to do is identify the most evidence-based ones that have had the most impact in other jurisdictions where we've seen some real outcomes that are demonstrable. Now, again, have there been reports that show this? Absolutely. But by doing a scan, a nationwide scan, so looking at counties, looking at cities, looking at states, and really winnowing down those options that are actionable, we think that that can have an impact on moving this forward into the next session.
And so is your position that all of these other reports from the Housing Division, from the Gwynn Center, from Washoe County, Clark County, from all of the municipalities, from the federal government, from all of these different sources that are required to put out even annual reports about this stuff, don't take into account what's happening across the United States, and therefore that's the piece that we're missing?
Meredith Levine for the record, and many of those studies do. What the piece that's missing is really putting them in one place and showing maximal or optimal impact, really collecting them, and then taking a look at how they intersect with existing law and existing regs, and seeing how we can really customize them to move it forward in the state.
I think it is obviously no surprise to anyone, I think on this committee, anybody who's had to talk to a constituent in your district, the cost of housing, the cost of rental increases, the unavailability of houses that can be purchased by individual buyers for a whole host of reasons. To me, it seems like we know a lot of the issues and these barriers to being able to obtain housing. If it's everything from homelessness and some of the causes thereof, how can we invest? We just talked about some of these mental health issues that exist as a result. We know that when you start talking about affordable housing, we've put a lot of money into that. We get a meeting, I don't know what, every meeting that we're here, we get a report, right, on different investments that we've made in affordable housing units. We're going to, I think, get one today again. And so I guess I just am struggling with, and I don't discount that we should continue to talk about how it is we can make housing more affordable. It just feels to me like we have had some of these issues in the past. We had multiple bills that came out of that from the 2019 session, from the prior study. Those bills were all passed by the legislature, signed into law to deal with a lot of these issues. We have ongoing studies to talk about this. There was legislation last session that dealt with everything from how we can help people maintain their houses to how we can ensure that there are more houses available for individual buyers as opposed to corporate buyers, how we can make sure that when we're talking about rental ability and stability, that we can address some of those problems. But apparently, I think there are folks who just don't like those as answers. We know, it feels like we know what the problems are, and so I recognize that it may be useful to put all of these different pieces into one place, but it is frustrating to be here talking about a study for a problem that we know many of the answers to, and it just feels a little bit like we are looking for something else because we don't like the thing that you would have to do in order to solve some of these problems. And so I'm sincerely hoping that what comes of this study is not just trying to find an alternative because we don't like the answers in front of us, because Nevadans who cannot afford housing, who cannot afford to buy a house, need policy solutions. And so I think like that's some of the frustration that I think some of us on the committee, certainly myself, have with seeing yet another housing study, because it feels like we know a lot of these answers, but it is going to take some courage to maybe do a few of the things that might be hard in order to solve that.
Meredith Levine for the record, and I welcome the opportunity to respond to that because I do hear you. There is certainly so much discussion and so much talk around housing, and I think that one of the advantages of a study like this, because I'm hearing your concerns and I'm feeling your frustration, and what I want to reassure you with is that some of those tried and true, like you said, the ones that break the logjam, those solutions likely could be possibly, right, identified in the study as a reinforcement of a path forward because the crisis is persistent. And so to the extent that, yes, it is another study, acknowledged, it is still a path to reconsider those options, how they've been effective in other places. There are ways to evaluate the efficacy of those interventions, and then also look at some novel solutions that may be complementary or may not, and that's what we hope to offer and that you'll take under advisement. So we do appreciate that, and we do understand that concern. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a few more questions for you. We're going to go to Senator Gansert next. I believe you're in our virtual room.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to ask questions, and I appreciate the discussion so far. So my question is, we're always looking for different types of funds, and it seems like that's something that we have to chase. A lot of times there's federal programs, and you have to be aware of them. Will part of this study be around the different buckets of funds that may be available to Nevada that we haven't identified? Because I know we're looking for the solutions, but we also have to be able to find the money, and sometimes the money gets rolled out and it's piecemeal, and we have to be able to apply for those grants. So you also be looking at sources of funds for any types of programs we want to develop.
Meredith Levine for the record, thank you for that question as well. Absolutely. Part of this is the buckets of funds, right? Because we can talk about the different interventions from a regulatory standpoint, from a statutory standpoint, but we also know that Nevada could be improving its pathways to federal dollars. We've seen great work in that area, and to the extent practicable, we bring those dollars in. That's what can make a big difference and have the biggest, I guess, ROI for this. And so looking at those dollars and looking at different tax credit programs, even perhaps property tax, et cetera, there are different ways to approach housing, and we want to be as inclusive to all of them as possible.
Thank you. I appreciate your response, because I think a lot of times money's the issue, and it's a moving target and an evolving target. So I appreciate the work that you've done on other types of issues that we have. Thank you.
Thank you. Assemblywoman Heidegger.
Thank you so much, Chair. And I agree with what my colleague, the Senate Majority Leader, said. We have so many studies going on throughout the state. I know the Nevada Housing Division collects information annually about the need for affordable housing throughout the state. We passed as a body Assembly Bill 213, which would require the cities and the counties to start collecting information on the need for housing, and not just affordable housing, but housing at all levels. And so we know that these reports are coming out. And so, Madam Chair, I know that the Nevada Housing Division is here because they're giving us a presentation on the Home Means Nevada. We know there's a need for affordable housing. We've invested as a state $500 million in affordable housing. And so, I mean, if we know they're here, if I could have them come up in Carson City to ask them about the information that they collect on an annual basis, and if that's enough, or if there's a need for another report. And after the Housing Division, if you are working in conjunction with the local governments, because they are going to be collecting information as well.
Thank you. And if we do have the Housing Division, we welcome you to the table. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee, Christine Hess for the record, and thank you, Assemblywoman Heidegger, for the question. So the Nevada Housing Division has a report that hopefully you all read, because it's one of my favorites, the Affordable Housing Progress Report. The timing this year is a little different. The legislation passed in 2023, Assembly Bill 213, did adjust the timing, so it will coincide with the fiscal year. But the Affordable Housing Progress Report is amazing. However, that report is specific to subsidized housing, right? So housing that has income restrictions. So it's a very thorough report and has a lot of information, but it is limited in scope. So the local jurisdictions provide information to the division around their affordable progress and what they're doing in the affordable space, but that is really limited to housing that has income restrictions. It doesn't go beyond that. So we also will be collecting and compiling information and hopefully providing some analysis as a result of Assembly Bill 213, which does go beyond that in terms of requiring the jurisdictions to provide information around their housing that is not just subsidized, but their housing plans over the next 5 years, and measures they're taking to promote that. That bill also required them to prioritize affordable housing. So there's a lot of opportunities for follow-up. Assemblywoman Heidegger, that is being led by the division's economist, which is currently a vacant position. However, good news, we'll be contracting back with our former economist, Betsy Fadali, who can help guide that. And additionally, we'll either hire or contract that position out before that report is due. So that second report, which is brand new, and per the legislation of Assembly Bill 213, it actually only requires the division to compile it. So the local governments are working, and I'd like to report that they're doing an amazing job. I know it was a difficult mandate per the legislation for the local governments, but they also already know this information. But what in the first meetings that the division had with the local governments, they're working together regionally, which makes sense, right? We know that the North is a little different than the South. So that's important. Additionally, what's important is both the Affordable Housing Progress Report and this new report does not take into account our rural partners, right? all of rural Nevada, which has its own challenges and needs, and certainly is having an affordable housing or housing affordability crisis as well. So the opportunity to understand additional solutions in my previous work, to have the Gwynn Center looking at that, I don't know that we have that in just one report now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hess, for being here. I mean, I think that leads me to my question. You had mentioned that the affordable housing report card that you publish has income restrictions. It only covers affordable housing, and that's kind of the point I was trying to make. The request before us is for money to fund a statewide study on affordable housing, not all housing. It's affordable housing only. And so I think it's duplicative, and I feel like we're missing the mark. We're going to be collecting information on something that the Nevada Housing Division already provides.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Hodegui. That would not be information I have. That would be certainly a question for the Gwynn Center. Affordable housing, I don't know if this report is specific to housing that is subsidized or if they're looking at the word affordable more broadly. In statute, affordable is defined in 3 tiers. Tier 1 is below 60% of area median income, which is really the space that the Nevada Housing Division functions in. Tier 2 is 60 to 80% of area median income. Households that have incomes between 60 and 80% of the area median income. And we function a little in that space, not much. And then Tier 3 is 80 to 120% of area median income. And in terms of inventory, we're not really functioning in that space. We do support down payment assistance that can help homeowners in that space. So I'm not sure what the Gwynn Center report is. I just wanted to share with you what the division reports on, but we're really pretty focused on that first tier, Tier 1.
Madam Chair, if that's okay, if I could have the Gwynn Center ask, because I know the request before us is to fund a statewide study on affordable housing. So I'd just like some more specifics on what they will be studying.
Meredith Levine for the record, absolutely. So we are looking at it in the more broadly construed understanding of affordability. So it's also workforce housing, et cetera. I mean, unfortunately, it's one of those terms that's become a bit of a catch-all that we use colloquially. And so because it does have that understanding, we used it here. But it is fair to say that we're looking across the income spectrum, across the distribution, I should say rather, in terms of how do we break some of these supply and demand logjams that we saw from the 2018 interim findings report and start to make housing affordable for all Nevadans, and that might in turn, or not, bring down housing prices in different brackets, but it is broader.
Okay, so it's affordability in housing, not so much as the traditional definition of affordable housing that we are accustomed to. Thank you.
Correct, thank you.
Senator Neal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So you mentioned, well, I have 2 questions. You mentioned workforce housing. Doesn't the county have either a white paper on workforce housing, because they're moving in this space right now? So how is that being integrated into what you're doing so that you're not reinventing the conversation that is already taking place?
Meredith Levine for the record. So I have to familiarize myself with that report before I am able to answer that question. I'm happy to circle back with you on that. What I would say, though, that this is a statewide study in intent, and so to the extent that it's county level, it's something we would want to adapt, to the broader state as a whole.
Okay. And maybe that's, Joanna wasn't here and she out in the hallway, but I know that they're building it right in a certain part of North Las Vegas. They're literally doing workforce housing, and Dagny, who came from NACO, is working on housing. And so maybe it's a conversation to find out how did they arrive at, deciding to do workforce housing, what were their obstacles, what were the things that they had to overcome, because it would play into that. And then my second question is, since you were talking about affordability within housing, is the conversation going to at least discuss or mitigate the corporate activity that's happening within the housing space, meaning hedge funds, corporations that have been buying up, as you saw recently, 234 plus housing. There were bills this session that tried to get at this aggregate purchases and limit corporate activity, which is a part of how housing is spiking and changing and migration and all of these other things. Are you going to address how to mitigate that and then propose legislative policy solutions around mitigating some of these things, or look at vetoed policy that may or may not have changed the game?
Meredith Levine, for the record, that's a great question, because it is one of the, I guess, choke points that we're viewing in the system, or we're seeing. And we're seeing that research come out of a lot of Western states. And so, well, it's coming out across the country, but we're seeing it particularly in Western states. And so looking at that and examining what kind of opportunities might exist there is certainly part of the suite of options that we potentially would take under advisement based on what evidence reveals itself under the study or within the course of the study.
It looks like Ms. Jacobs came in. Did you hear kind of what I was asking about? You guys are embarking on workforce housing in a certain, I believe it's by tropical kind of area. I know it's by my dad's school. So how did you get to this place? Was there a white paper? Did you do any kind of preliminary, why should the county do workforce housing versus anything else?
Thank you, Joanna Jacob from Clark County. For the record, thank you, Senator Neal, for kind of re-summarizing what you were trying to get at. Did we do a white paper? No. I think that workforce housing, I started at the county in 2019 prior to the pandemic, and workforce housing, just from being at the county and being a social service, the regional social service provider, we knew that it was a need. I think what you're referring to, we have multiple programs going on, so I've been listening to this discussion with interest and certainly appreciative of the Gwynn Center's work, and I really would like to encourage coming to Clark County because we have years of data that we could share to make this the study productive and to fill in the holes of what we are not also doing under AB 213. Back to your question, and one of those years of data, for example, is 4 years of data that we have mitigated fees and prioritized affordable housing projects, but we have had minimal, and I'm going to say it, minimal developer interest at coming forward to respond to our RFPs. And that is not a criticism of our developer partners. We have some very good developer partners, but it's looking at some of what we've had in place and maybe if we need to relook at it. Specific to workforce housing, I think you might be referring to some of the initiatives we put forward with our community housing fund. I'm sorry, I'm out of breath. I ran in here. That is $180 million that we put in from our ARPA funds. Clark County, I'll just tell you, that's Clark County's share of what you're discussing of the state's share. We were eligible for revenue replacement because our revenue loss exceeded what we received for in our local funds, but so we took the revenue replacement and then we put it into our general fund and then funded our community housing fund out of that. So it kind of freed us up of some of the restrictions that you're debating here today. And that's our community housing fund, which is funding is really geared towards affordable housing, but future plans are we are also doing permanent supportive housing with that fund and a community land trust, which is going to be single family ownership, deed restricted to keep it affordable. And so one of those things, and the workforce housing is also part of that initiative. And I think, the one near your dad's house, I think, may have been something that Commissioner McCurdy also championed through that we began with a a federal appropriation request and then kind of seeded it from there, because one of our issues has been, and one of our priorities is on the sustainability of projects once we go after like one-shot money. So I think that's what you're getting at. Did we do a white paper? Did we do a study? No, because as the social service provider in the state, we know there's tremendous need everywhere. And so we're basically, we go out and we look at where we can acquire land, because that's a serious barrier to development of housing, as you know. So we could look out and we see where we can acquire land, where the need is, based on the feedback that we get. And we're trying to kind of spread it out throughout the county, throughout our whole region.
So just final question, are you a stakeholder in the study? Are you guys offering up your wisdom?
Well, I don't know if it's wisdom per
Oh,
se.
well, learned experience is equally as value.
Yes, Senator Neal. If we're not today, because it's still in its infant stages, I'm going to insist that hopefully we are a stakeholder. So yes, we'd be interested. And also because I think there was some discussion of AB 213. We are, Ms. Hess mentioned regional collaboration. Clark County and your cities here in Southern Nevada are trying to share costs. I can't give you a lot of details because those discussions are ongoing, but we are trying to share our costs that were of the study that was mandated by AB 213. So we've been having ongoing discussions with our planning staff, our government affairs staff, and our affordable housing community development staff in all the jurisdictions to come together. And we're going to contract probably for that study and share it regionally. So we're already doing this. And so I have a lot of interest in making sure that the work, as the discussion was said, is not duplicative, and where we can maybe work on what we already have underway. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe Senator Titus has a question.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to ask a question. First off, I thank the Gwynn Center for bringing this forward. I appreciate it because I'm hearing a lot of conversation about the needs in Clark County and what has been done already. And what I'm hearing from this study, you're going to really look at a statewide issue, statewide concerns. And in the rural areas, I hear from my folks, especially in Douglas County, and we talk about affordable housing. We talk about worker housing and some place like South Lake Tahoe. And how do we make this work and all the solutions, and trying to look at a statewide issues, bringing all the facts that have all the issues that we see as a statewide problem certainly would be helpful. And it's not just about building affordable housing. There's transit with that and all of these other issues. So that's a thank you. My second thing is more of a question. And one of the things I heard brought up by one of my colleagues regarding corporate investment in housing. And one of the things, areas of my concern is the amount of foreign investors that are buying up property, buying up housing, and some of those issues. And so something I would like to see in your study is actually the amount of land that is foreign land bought up for investing, and folks that are not necessarily friendly to not only our government and federally, but statewide, and such as Chinese investors, those type of things. So hopefully this study may look at some of the other aspects of housing and why it's not affordable too, and what has been happening. And so I want to thank you for that, and just wondered if it will expand on who's actually buying the houses, who owns the land.
Meredith Levine for the record. Thank you for the question and for the comment. To the extent possible, if we can uncover that information, as you likely are aware, some of this is behind trusts and other information. I'm not sharing anything novel by saying that, but to the extent possible, we do know that there is a question around vacancy rates and investor-owned properties, and so that is pushing in different areas, and so we want to be able to take a closer look at all the dimensions of it. Nothing is off the table for this study.
Very good. I appreciate that. Appreciate the comment. And thank you, Madam Chair, for the question.
Thank you so much.
And Madam Chair, this is Michael Stewart again. Oh, sorry. I apologize.
Go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to add, I'm taking feverish notes, obviously, through all of this conversation, and just to reassure the Interim Finance Committee that, we're taking this all in. Part of our goal really is to do this landscape analysis that Ms. Levine is talking about, and ultimate goal is for this evidence-based, actionable policy considerations for you as lawmakers. And so taking all this into consideration is very important to us, and we just want you to know that we're committed to that and giving you, sort of that deep dive evidence-based recommendations that you can take to the session. And so we are very pleased with these conversations and also the partnerships that we hope to forge as we're going through. So thank you.
Thank you. We're going to go to Senator Neal and then wrap it up with Speaker Yeager.
Sorry, I just wanted to add this in because maybe if you get this request, UNLV has a person that's been tracking corporate investors and who's buying up. He probably doesn't want his name mentioned, but his name is Sean McCoy. You might want to just go ahead and get with Ms. Brooks in the back and ID him on the UNLV campus. Why? Because I worked with him for almost a year on the bill that was vetoed. So just awesome help if you're going to, do whatever you're going to do with $0, but just something to think about.
Meredith Levine, thank you.
Well, if he didn't want to be identified, he's identified now. Speaker Yeager.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Good to see you, Mr. Stewart and Ms. Levine. And hopefully you appreciate all the questions because I know you guys do great work. And I think what you're seeing here is really the committee trying to focus a little bit on things that we think would be meaningful to us in the legislative session. I do want to recommend, if you haven't, I think former Senator Julia Ratty probably knows more about constructing affordable housing than anyone I've ever met in the state. So I'd encourage you to get with her. And then, the question I had was just this. I mean, thinking back to the last legislative session, I'll just have one bill as an example because it's not a complicated bill, but my colleague here to my left, Assemblywoman Howdigi, sponsored Assembly Bill 298, and that really did three, I think, pretty basic things, but I think that got at not the question of constructing affordable housing, but the question of how do we keep people in housing? How do we make sure that housing stays affordable? And so, just briefly, number one, it prevented landlords from collecting multiple application fees when they weren't doing any work for that fee because, we heard from individuals that they had to apply like 30, 40 places at a time, and they didn't get any of that money back. The second thing it did was make sure that fees that were going to be charged were specified and detailed, and that landlords couldn't charge other fees that weren't listed in the rental documents. And then finally, it actually created a 10% cap on rent increases for seniors, being defined as people over 62 years of age, and essentially folks who are more vulnerable or disabled. And the idea there, of course, was these are people generally on fixed incomes, and if rent goes up more than 10% on a yearly basis, probably going to get evicted and not be able to pay. And so my question is this, right? We passed this bill. I think it would have provided real relief to people that this bill was targeting. Unfortunately, it got vetoed. I'll say I don't understand the veto message. It doesn't make sense to me based on what the bill does. But is your work on this topic, is part of your stakeholder discussion going to be to talk to people who would have been impacted by this bill, would have been able to stay in their place without a 10% rent increase, people that were having a hard time finding a place to rent because of the application fees? Because I think that's important to know, the practicality of what something like this would have done for people. And so, just sort of asking there, is that contemplated? I know $150,000 isn't a lot of money. You guys won't have a lot of time. But I think it would be really valuable for us to hear from people and try to quantify how many people a bill like this would have helped stay in what is now affordable housing, but because of the fees and because of the rent increase is no longer affordable housing.
Meredith Levine for the record. I first want to comment just really briefly because you mentioned the conversation we're having here today. I can't say how much I welcome it. I think it's so important if we're doing robust, rigorous work that the right questions are being asked, and that's a good use of fiscal dollars. My full title is Director of Economic and Fiscal Policy, so that matters. So that's the first thing I want to address. The second thing is, you're right, we are under a bit of a time constraint, and so I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver and tell you that we're going to be able to quantify that. However, the lived experience of people in the community who are experiencing challenges around housing could not be more salient. And so to the extent that we can have those conversations and hear about what that looks like for people, that's something that is very important to this report, because those are the barriers that also need to be re-identified, to be solidified, to be cemented, to make for a strong report. So thank you.
Ms. Levine, I think you can tell by the conversation we've had on this subject matter, it's a small dollar amount in comparison to other things that we've heard today and will hear later today, but it's a very important issue for this body, and that was displayed in a number of pieces of legislation from the last legislative session. During this discussion today, there was a lot of comments that were made that are not included in the backup documentation of what the study will include. So my request to you is that I know you need to get to work on this study, so the approval of these funds will help you get to work to have that study completed in a timely manner so that we as a body will have it for the next legislative session. But because of the discussion and so many other things that were included and the lack of exactly who those stakeholders would be, my ask to you is to come back to our next IFC meeting in April with a list of stakeholders so we know exactly who you are communicating with. Not a work program, just an informational, so we know how you're moving forward. And all those things that we've heard today that were not in the backup documentation that will be included in that study, bring that to this body.
Meredith Levine for the record. I want to thank you for that. I am more than happy to return to the next IFC meeting and provide that information to you.
Thank you so much. Members, any other questions? Not seeing any here in Las Vegas. Not seeing any hands raised in our virtual room. Is there anyone in Carson City with any further questions? And not seeing any hands there. So with that, I will accept a motion to approve.
Move to approve, Chair.
Second.
Thank you so much. We have a motion to approve by Assemblywoman Hadigi, a second by Senator Don Darrell Loop. Any discussion on the motion? Not seeing any. All in favor, please say aye. 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 Any opposed? Thank you so much. The motion carries, and I look forward to seeing you back here in April with the informational items that we requested.
Thank you so much. We are very appreciative.
Thank you, committee.
Thank you. And with that, we'll now move on to the next items on our agenda, item D24 and D25. Yes, please. Go ahead and fill in all the chairs you need to fill in. And welcome to IFC.
Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Patricia Charlton, and I am the Interim Chancellor for the Nevada System of Higher Education. Thank you so much for the opportunity to present before you today. I am joined this afternoon by Mr. Chris Fatone. He is the Vice Chancellor for Finance and Chief Financial Officer for the system, and also the Vice President of Public Safety from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, Adam Garcia. So first, I want to just thank you for the opportunity today to present before you on a much-needed ask on behalf of our system, and specifically for the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and our Southern Command. I want to first recognize the December 6th events that occurred at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, where we were in a situation where we realized the most unfortunate events that can happen on a college campus or in any public space, where we realized a active shooter, where we had the loss of 3 faculty members, and a significant injury to a 4th faculty member. So we are here today. First, we want to recognize also on that unprecedented event the amazing response that we received from our Metropolitan Police Department, from all of the first responders and police departments throughout our municipalities in Southern Nevada, the fire departments, our hospitals, but I would be remiss if I also didn't recognize our University Police Department and Chief Garcia and his team that were able to address that situation in a timely manner. It could have been far worse. So following those events of December 6th, as the chancellor, I established an ad hoc committee on public safety that brought together institutions throughout our higher education system, stakeholders, including, you heard from Doug Unger earlier today, our Nevada Faculty Alliance, but faculty, students, classified staff, every stakeholder group that we have, as well as emergency management personnel throughout our state to support us in the work that we needed to do to move forward on what was needed to make sure that we have a safe and secure environment within our higher education system. And obviously, that's not just our faculty and our staff, it's our students, but it's also the community that engages in our very open campuses. The request that you see before you today, at $2.6 million, is very specific to Southern Nevada. And these funds and these expenditures will occur through the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, through the system office. This is to support and to augment our staffing needs. And while I would like to say that this is the last time that you might see me, it is not the last time that you will see me, I hope. We have additional needs, but this is our highest priority needs, is to put individuals in front of our campuses, specifically UNLV, as that is a situation where the environment in which the incident occurred. We have leveraged our insurance processes, and so this funding will pick up from where our insurance processes have occurred into the end of the calendar year. And so when I say that, our chief has been very actively engaged in recruiting. We do have a challenge with recruiting and retaining police professionals and public safety personnel, but we believe by the end of the calendar year that we will have at least our currently funded line items secured, and to be able to support this as we move forward. One, we will also be leveraging our ask that we come forward with, not just personnel costs, but today the ask is specific to personnel cost. We will be also leveraging our resources across our federal delegation, other grant opportunities that we have. We recognize that resources are limited. We've heard the presentation today, but we also recognize as we move forward, we need to work collectively and where we can identify resources. We will also be coming back to you through the legislative process, and we're trying to do this collectively and prioritizing through the ad hoc committee. In addition to being the UNLV police chief and the Vice President of Public Safety, Adam is also chairing the Committee of Public Safety for the Chancellor's Office. And so we are prioritizing our requests, as I mentioned, with our institutions. And so we stand ready to answer any questions that you might have, either from a fiscal perspective with our Vice Chancellor and or operationally through our Vice President for Public Safety.
Thank you so much for the presentation. And first of all, I wanted to say thank you to you and the men and women who work for you and what you did on that day to keep the students and staff as safe as you possibly could. It was a situation that was heartbreaking, but the men and women who worked for you stepped up in a real way and were heroes that day. And just want to say thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
We have a few questions. We're going to start with Assemblywoman Mosca, and then we'll go to Assemblywoman Brown-May.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you, Chancellor, for being here today. And my question to you is, we are working on the NG funding formula, so I'd love to hear how you also think these funds are going to be integrated with the work happening there in the future.
Thank you, Chris Fatone, NG Chief Financial Officer. Thank you for the question. I know that we are here today with this request specific for this contract through the end of the fiscal year. We do have additional items in our process as we're working through the budget requests from the campuses, and we do anticipate bringing some of those requests forward in the next session, whether that's through the formula or otherwise as enhancements. This specific request is only through the end of this calendar year.
And thank you so much. I just think it's important to consider how we're going to support it in the long term for our students and our faculty. Thank you.
Thank you. Assemblywoman Brown-May.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much for the presentation. I want to reiterate those comments. December 6th was a day that we should have been celebrating birthdays, but instead we were wondering where our students and our colleagues were. It was a very traumatic day for many, many in the Las Vegas Valley, and so I can only offer my congratulations for your quick response. Excuse me, my questions are really relative to the contract security services and how do you feel like this contract is really going to be able to address the safety and security needs at the campus first and foremost, but throughout all of NSHE, right? How are we going to utilize contracted positions given the fact that we do have vacancies? I see in the work program that you're anticipating you're going to be able to fill vacancies as we go forward, and that this really is only until the end of the year. I'm wondering if you could just talk through that a little bit. And then my second part to that question is, funding this in NSHE really gives you the authority to be able to utilize these positions anywhere, contracted security positions, right? But you've just stated that really your intention here is only UNLV, but any other institution in Southern Nevada that potentially would have a high risk, would you be able to move positions there?
Thank you for that. For the record, Adam Garcia, Vice President of Public Safety Services and Director of University Police Southern Command. So let me answer your last question first. This contract actually reaches across to all Southern Nevada, all institutions of higher education in the South, UNLV, DRI, Nevada State, CSN, and the Nevada System of Higher Education facilities in the South. So they, as of now, the contract calls for 8 officers to be assigned to the UNLV main campus and DRI, and the other 7 to CSN and Nevada State University. As you may know, I went before the Board of Regents in December of 2022 and requested a critical hire designation, meaning that we could hire individuals who are already PERS retired. I made a similar request earlier this month. With that, and with the support of the legislature in the last legislative session, in which my employees received a raise, I would call it considerable raise. We are looking at filling all, if not most, of our vacant positions. We have 28 currently within the South that are vacant by the end of this calendar year. So we're on track at this point to do that. And that will then give us the opportunity to provide visibility that is required for our campuses in Southern Nevada, and will no longer need the visibility of this contracted group.
Thank you. I did want to just add for the record, as I mentioned, that the expenditures would occur, I'm sorry.
Would
for
you
the
state your
record?
name?
Yes, of course. I'm so sorry. Patricia Charlton, Interim Chancellor for the Nevada System of Higher Education. So the expenditures will occur through the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. We have what's called a consolidated police force, University Police Command, both in the South, and Chief Garcia does facilitate that. So UNLV serves as the host institution for all of the coordination on our public safety. So I just wanted to correct for the record how the expenditures will occur, but he does manage all of the Southern Nevada Command, and the Northern Command is led by Chief Eric James. And so these funds are specific to Southern Nevada and under the auspice of Chief Garcia.
Thank you. Follow-up, Chair? Thank you. I just, for clarification, we're proposing to hire contracted security as opposed to filling vacant positions with NSHE. And I'm curious to know about the training or qualifications of the entities that are bidding to fill these contracts. If we know that we have expectations for our employees and our staff, right, are those expectations comparable for the organizations that are bidding these contracts?
Adam Garcia for the record. The answer is yes. So the criteria that we've established for this security company is much, much higher than what you would typically see with a security guard company. Many of them are either past prior military or prior law enforcement. They undergo a pretty rigorous background process as well as a training protocols that we have established within the department that gives us a higher level of comfort in using these individuals. Actually, they've been in place for just over 2 months now, and one of their officers has already saved the life of a student who in all likelihood probably would have passed away from a separate event, not dealing with what we're discussing today. So they're highly trained, they have prior experience, they all have what we feel is a very comfortable level in which we could employ them. And so we will be going out to an RFP process, and all of those, what we're requiring is going to be part of that RFP process as well. So the other answer to your question is we're not filling the security positions in lieu of filling the police officer positions. We are filling the police officer positions as quickly as we can and using the security guard contract to support and augment what we're doing and provide that visibility that's important for our campuses.
Thank you. I have Senator Don Darrell Loop next.
Thank you very much. And I too would like to thank you, Chief and Chancellor, and everyone that was on the campus that day and kept the safety of the students in mind as they dealt with that unfortunate incident. One of the things that I want to know is I want some confirmation that we make sure that all our students are safe, but also that we make sure that we sort of focus where this incident was at UNLV so that that is fresh in the minds of our students when they go on that campus, if you will. The other thing is how quickly, if you get this, how quickly will the turnaround be? Will it be transitional? In other words, you'll hire a couple, hire a couple, hire a couple, or will you be able to hire all of the personnel that you need and put them in place? So give us a little bit of timeline, I guess, about how that's going to happen and some clarification about how that's going to take place.
Thank you. We have invited the current, Adam Garcia for the record, we have invited the current contractor, the security contractor, to bid on the new RFP that is being put out. And so given that they are aware of our expectations as it relates to the number of personnel that we need, that will not only be available for UNLV. Right now, this group is working at UNLV specifically. So that contract will continue if the RFP is approved and the funding is approved, and then they will expand it to the other campuses as well. And so the timeline is to continue it at UNLV with the contract that we currently have, and then to expand it to the other campuses within 30 days after the RFP is awarded.
I appreciate that information, and once again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Assemblywoman Kasama.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, too, for all your work and service during this difficult time. I just wanted to state I just really support this. I think protecting our campuses, everybody that's on the campus is critically important. And I just wanted to point out, too, that I really think it's good that we're making this through this proposal that you can bring back the retired police officers. I just think that's so important. They're already trained, they're there, and it won't risk their retirement benefits, and therefore they'll be able to come back. So I just think that's a great part of this request too, and thank you for including that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Neal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I just had a quick question. So out of the 2.6 million, is there going to be any that's going to be used for an environmental design change? I'm specifically interested in lighting on the campus, within a mile, the sidewalk. When you go out, I mean, I know that there was a different risk that happened, but there are significant risks that are occurring literally right on the sidewalk. When students have to walk, if they walk to Maryland Parkway and Flamingo, it's like, I'm just wondering how much of this is going to expand some lighting, because lighting reduces crime. It's one of the, if you can see, then you know, right? Anyway.
Certainly, for the record, Patricia Charlton, Interim Chancellor on the Nevada System of Higher Education, through you, Chair, to Senator Neal. So first, I would just add that we have established the Chancellor's Committee on Public Safety, and so this is a very broad-based committee that is looking very comprehensively at all of our public safety elements: lighting, locking systems for doors, video surveillance, all of the other components that may go, including even training for our faculty, our staff, our students, those that visit our campuses, even an emergency notification. So this request specifically today is just to augment the personnel for the Southern Nevada Command. We will be coming back as our committee, and Vice President Garcia is chairing that effort to prioritize the needs of all of the higher education system. And we also recognize that this is not unique to higher education. It also transcends into the state and our state agencies as well. We have open campuses. We have open landscapes. We welcome well over 100,000 students, 15,000 employees, and then we have countless community members that interact with our campuses. We want every single person that comes in contact with higher education to feel safe. Lighting is a very, very important component. So we will be prioritizing those. They will be coming forward in subsequent asks from the Nevada System of Higher Education. It will also be coming through the budgetary process, but we're also leveraging that with grant opportunities, either through public and private grant opportunities through our federal delegation. We recognize that your resources are limited. We also recognize that we need to all step up and make sure that everybody feels safe. And so I'd like to ask VP Garcia if he'd like to talk a little bit about the prioritizing and the work of the committee. Thank you.
For the record, Adam Garcia, Vice President of Public Safety Services. So there are actually two committees that have been formed. One is UNLV-centric, and that was formed by President Whitfield, that is going to look at the processes, the protocols, safety enhancements at UNLV. The Chancellor's Ad Hoc Committee that she has asked me to chair is going to look at it from a holistic approach across to all NSHE, both north and south, What I have set out for this committee is three things. One, that we are not a talker, we are a doer committee. So within the first 30 to 60 days, the plan is that we will make recommendations to the chancellor on potential safety enhancements. Within the first 6 months, we will make additional recommendations that can be implemented within a short period of time. And then 12 plus months. What do we need to do within that, beyond the 12 months, in order to enhance security? Whether it's lighting, whether it can be done within the first 30 to 60 days, whether it can be done in the first 6 months, or it's going to be a long-term process. So I have made very clear to the subcommittees that we have created from across NC, again, north and south, to look at this from that holistic approach and come from it from that perspective with those milestones in place.
Great. Members, any other questions? All right. Not seeing any, then I'll entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, so moved.
I'll second.
Thank you. We have a motion from Assemblywoman Bacchus, a second from Senator Dondero Loop. Any discussion on the motion? Speaker Yeager.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I know this has been said, but I just wanted to publicly thank Chief Garcia. I think nobody really knows if they're going to rise to the moment when it comes. And all the discussions I've had after this incident happened with folks who were there and the after-action review, they had indicated that your actions and your department's actions were heroic and saved lives that day. And, I'm a believer that you can't say thank you enough. So, on behalf of the legislature, on behalf of the committee as a whole, I want to thank you for rising to that moment and making sure that incident was limited as much as it could be.
Thank you.
Thank you. And seeing no other discussion, all in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Aye. All right, the motion does carry. Thank you so
Chair,
much.
if you just don't mind, I would just like to give my heartfelt appreciation for this committee, and thank you so much. We'll see you soon.
Thank you. All right, moving on to our next item on our agenda. It is item D26 and D27. Good afternoon. And we're ready whenever you are. Just go ahead and state your names for the record.
Good afternoon. For the record, Marla McDade Williams, Administrator, Division of Child and Family Services. So these items relate to upgrading security cameras at Northern Nevada Youth Training Center and Summit View Youth Center. And Nevada Youth Training Center. Did I say that? Yes.
Is that it with your presentation?
Yes, Madam Chair. So they are to replace security cameras at our detention facilities.
And the total amount of the request for the camera replacement?
So the amounts are $873 and $873,360. So, Madam Chair, Marla McDade Williams, so item number 26 allocates the funding from the COVID relief programs, and then item 27 gives it to DCFS for us to spend.
Thank you so much. And by doing this, that will put us in compliance with Section 889 of the Federal National Defense Authorization Act and in compliance with the Prison Rape Elimination Act, correct?
That's correct.
Perfect. Members, any questions? Not seeing any questions here in Las Vegas. Do we have any questions in Carson City or anyone joining us in the virtual meeting room? Not seeing any, then I will entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, I'd so move.
Second?
Have a motion from Assemblywoman Bacchus, a second from Senator Dondero Loop. Any discussion on the motion? Not seeing any. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Aye. Seeing none in opposition, the motion does carry. Thank you so much. We've already done item E. That takes us to the next item, item F, which is an informational item only, and it's a status report on the Home Means Nevada initiative. Good afternoon and welcome to IFC.
Good afternoon, Chairman Roman Moreno, members of the committee. For the record, Steve Acroth, Administrator of the Nevada Housing Division, here with Christine Hess, our Chief Financial Officer. Just to bring you some quick updates to the spreadsheets that were provided earlier. We are now at $74 million expended, which is roughly 15% of the funds of the entirety of the Home Means Nevada award. We do have a Friday submission deadline for our Board of Finance items, so we expect a couple of more projects to come through at the April Board of Finance, which will change those agreement statuses that you see on your sheet. We've gotten indications from a number of projects that are using HUD funding that, in fact, their HUD funding has been approved. As this committee is probably well aware, there's a lasagna-style financing cap stack in all of these projects. So effectively, one of those critical components is HUD funding sources, and we've gotten indications from some of our outstanding developments that those are moving forward, just moving forward, I guess. And then we'll have more updates in about a month for the April 11th meeting, where we'll have pictures, updated pictures that I can provide to you that I don't need Mr. Lester to assist me with, I don't think. They'll be in the report. And with that, we'll be happy to entertain any questions.
Thank you so much. Members, any questions? Not seeing any down south. Is there anyone up north that has a question, or anyone in the virtual room with a question for the Housing Division or Business and Industry? Excuse me. Not seeing any. Well, members, this was only an informational item. I thank you so much for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you back in April with those updated photos. So that brings us to the last item on our agenda, and that's our second session of public comment. If you would like to give public comment and you're here in Las Vegas, I invite you to the table. If you're there in Carson City, I invite you to the table there. If you're listening to us online and would like to call in to make public comment, please dial 669-900-6833. When prompted, enter your ID number of 891-5307-2401, then press the pound key. We have no one coming to the table here in Las Vegas, and not seeing anyone at the table in Carson City. Do we have anyone joining us on the phone line that would like to make public comment?
Fair, the public line is open and working, but there are no callers.
Thank you so much for that. So members, seeing that there's no one to make public comment, that brings us to the end of today's agenda. And I will see you again in April. This meeting is now adjourned.
Thank you.
Bye.